What's up, everybody? This is Blue Toshi and Disco, your hosts for Decentral Lens. We have an awesome week of news for you this week. Disco, how you doing today?
I'm feeling revved up. I'm feeling good to go. I'm excited for the show. And, I feel like things are starting to kick back into gear and I like it.
Absolutely. Well, happy Bitcoin Infinity Day, everybody, and enjoy the opening.
This is Decentral Lens, distilling the crypto news you need to know and why.
All right, I still got to get used to how short that is. So, Bitcoin Infinity Day. I'm not going to lie, been in crypto since 2014, and I was like, what's Bitcoin Infinity Day? Well, I will tell you now that I have looked it up asking Venice. Bitcoin Infinity Day is 21 million Bitcoin as the denominator, and the 8 sign represents infinity, or the 8 for August 21st, and that infinity is every single asset in the world and in the universe trying to fit into that 21 million Bitcoin. So to the moon and beyond.
Just as I knew or suspected, but thank you for the clarity and the brevity of the explanation. I'm happy to know now. Yes, go infinity.
Oh, and Michael Saylor, I assume all the media you post on your X account is CCO because I completely screen captured the video and stole it because it looks good and I know it'll draw people's attention. But wow, what a week.
Wow.
I say that every week, Disco, but I'm fired up today. I'm fired up about all these different stories, but the themes, it seems like every week are themes, but there's a lot of rhyming and repeating.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But that's kind of part of the solidification of progress. You know what I mean? It used to feel like, some of the steps that we were taking, it was like, yeah, but are those really solid and are those secure and everything? And now we're seeing them as, I guess, essential building blocks with which we're seeing momentum come. And, we always kind of go to this, we look at how to frame the show, we look at how to frame the week. And, a recurring theme always seems to be just this inevitability of the adoption. And it's almost like, why hasn't everything just moved to the, and gone crazy? But again, fundamentals are in place. And, when I used to work and work with trends and stuff like that and music, it's like, it always was like, why is this taking so long to spread across the whole country or this or that? And things just take longer. Once you're clued in on it, you're like, oh my God, this should happen immediately. What's the lag? But the lag is there. And as long as the foundations are legit and it's building, just be patient. You're going to be really happy with the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. What did Eric Voorhees say last week? And if you guys didn't check that out, it was an awesome interview on Bitcoin, crypto, and AI, and kind of the race for self-sovereignty of your information and your mind. But he was saying things, you may be able to loosely predict what happens, but they're never going to happen in the way you think they are, and they never happen the moment that you think they're going to happen, which is what, you just said, Disco. But you never know. You got to pack your bags for the future. But it just seems like more and more people, dare I say, we know the institutions are coming, and the states and the sovereign actors, the countries, I don't want to say en masse yet, but every week we have a new one coming up, and we won't quite get into that yet. But as kind of part of our intro banter, a lot of local normies and our friends and the people we interact with every day, even though I said Bitcoin had to get to 100,000 for the normies to pay attention, get back in when the mainstream media talks about it, but they're talking about it, and more of them are getting in because of that relative or brother or cousin that they have.
Yeah, it's starting to, kind of seep out, right? And just to go back to a little bit about this unpredictability, it's so weird. We have like the advent of these predictive markets and everything, and it's remarkable. We have right now, we're in the middle of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago this week, and I just go back to like how short a time ago it was when there was the assassination attempt, and when that happened, like it was just like, just sign him up. He's in place no matter what. Like there's nothing that could really change that. And now we're sitting there 75 days away or whatever. And the only thing I'm sure of is that something weird or crazy will probably happen that we couldn't even fathom or predict. And that's, so really just expecting something, kind of crazy to come out of left field is almost the new norm. So it's just, there's a lot of interesting things going on. We always talk about how, yes, there's negatives in the overall world right now for sure, but it's just such a fertile place. It's just such a fertile time for, to really kind of dig into different, intellectual thoughts and to really watch this progress. So it's what a time to be alive, right?
Yeah, it is an interesting time to be alive, and I'm here for it and I love it. And I think the net of that is don't let the media and information, even the information that you want to receive from the people you trust, like don't let it hijack your brain, because it's easy for all of us to get into our echo chambers, and us included in Bitcoin. I like my orange shelled chamber, but we just have to keep an open mind and see what's going to happen. But like you said, I think the only thing we know that's going to happen for sure is things are going to get weird and crazy. And, hopefully we'll be able to discern what's real and what's the tail wagging the dog, in this whole thing.
Yeah, that's super important. And just kind of a random aside, I was showing my daughter, who now I have to kind of go through any new purchases from a fashion perspective. So I'll screenshot her like some shoes and I'll be like, dude, are these cool? And she's like, what's with everything you sending me being orange now? So I wonder if I'm like subconsciously to the point where it's like, well, that's cool because it's orange. And she's like, dude, every shoe you send me has like an orange pop. I'm like, all right, I guess I've been pilled.
It's not red, it's not blue, it's an orange, right?
Yeah. And so it's just interesting how that happens. And we saw some stories this week where it's like, yeah, you got to kind of pump into your kind of critical thinking and assess, what you see to make sure that you're acting off of, your thesis as opposed to kind of being manipulated.
Yeah, and just to close the beginning, my dentist, I got my teeth cleaned this morning, so I was in a bit of a rush this morning. But my dentist, it took an hour to get my teeth cleaned. Half hour of that was actually getting my teeth cleaned, and the other half hour was talking to both my dentist and the hygienist about crypto. So It's here. He's throwing all these coins. Have you heard of this coin? I'm like, no. He goes, well, I mostly have Bitcoin and ETH. Like that's my main thing, but I have all these Demu. There's all these other ones. I'm like, interesting. Like it's cool to hear. And he's been in it for a little while, but as I was walking out, even the hygienist is like, my brother won't stop talking about it. Cause the first thing I said was like, oh, I bet once he starts talking crypto with his clients are like, turn the brain off. And she's like, no, my brother actually slowly got me into it and just said like, keep it simple. And so she got it too. So, it's like, it's creeping into mainstream. It's crossed the chasm. It's oozing into mainstream population ever so slowly. And the cool thing is I feel like everyone's got their different bent and their different rabbit holes, but people aren't just going in and be like, oh, I just grabbed a little. That was the last couple cycles. I feel like people are getting some and learning about it, which is huge.
Yeah. And, kind of to get into some of the stuff, through this week and some of that is you're also seeing people get into it with a long-term mentality. And I think that that's probably significantly different than, some of the other cycles. I can't speak to them all, but it seems as if, once people kind of cross the bridge and get involved in whether it's the ETF as the onboarding or whatever it may be, it seems like they're in it and they're not getting, super scared by dips. They're accepting them and they're understanding, that they could be opportunities. So again, we go back to those foundational progressive steps, right? And the fact that you have people that I remember before I had people like, okay, how do I make 20 grand in a day? I hear that's what happens in crypto. And it's like, you kind of don't have as much of that, at least maybe more on the Bitcoin side of it. I'm sure it's there on some of the other chains.
Yeah, we don't this isn't a show for grifters. For those of you who've watched before, just, like it, retweet it. You can actually ask questions. It's not very intuitive, but if you ask questions there, we can put it on the air and we will answer those questions. So we're independent media, as Disco always likes to point out. But we, obviously we have our biases, but we're not bought. So we will always distinguish between advertising and not. And I think that's super important as, again, the battle for your mind and for kind of this groupthink. We learned that AI basically, they're censoring things, and people are the questions that are most commonly asked, especially around politics and certain historical events, they're writing it with a human bias within ChatGPT and some of these places. So, we have to fight for openness for our minds and the self-sovereignty, obviously, of our money. So it's all happening at once, but everything is so intertwined.
Yeah, you have to do like almost the mental reps of just making sure that you're putting yourself through the steps to make sure that you're actually looking at things from as nuanced and critical a perspective as you can, because it's too easy to just get in the lazy pool and go down the river. But you really gotta put in some work to make sure that you're not just getting kind of hijacked in terms of your mentality. And one of the most salient points that Eric made, which I've thought about 1,000 times since the show, was that right now there's more of a motivator for people to search out or to seek or to stick with decentralized AI is more based on the bias than the privacy. So whatever it may be, but now everyone's kind of got a little spidey sense, or they're developing more of it about bias. Yep. And I think that's a good progression for us overall to really be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. Check out that show there for we were proud to do it, but he is a human, eloquent, I want to say soundbite machine, because that almost reduces him down. But I'm going through and making clips of all the really important points he made. And I have like 12 already, and I'm 16 minutes in. I've like 43 minutes left. Like, this is going to be a full-time job, but he's so eloquent, and he's so good at explaining why self-sovereignty and the First and Fourth Amendments are so important. So let's dive in, Disco. This is, like I said, I'm fired up. I got some surprises for you today, surprises for the audience. But it's going to be exciting, and I'm terrible at keeping surprises. So
I know. So let's jump in. Let's unwrap the gifts.
That reminds me when you always say how giddy you are. So let's giddy up. Let's go. Where do you want to start? You want to start with adoption?
Yeah, I love it. As we said, like that's one of the biggest recurring themes that we see, week to week. So let's go there.
All right. This just in South Korea is indirectly getting involved in crypto by buying Microstrategy stock. Disco raised a good question the other day. Why don't they just go directly in the ETFs? I'm not sure why, going straight to the leverage play. But, government pension funds more and more. And I feel like it's almost a theme now. The first section of our show, beyond a special day dedicated to Bitcoin like today, is always going to be about adoption, because we're seeing, I think we're at we're not on the blade of the hockey stick, we're on the bottom of the handle, right? It's just going to start going up, and they just keep trickling in more and more.
Yeah. And so just a note, I didn't realize, but South Korea is the third largest public pension fund in the world. So you're talking about an extremely significant, operation to get in. And I believe Japan is the number one and Norway is number two. But seeing them go in and purchase an additional 34 million of MicroStrategy shares, yes, it goes to the question of, why not underlying asset? Right. Why not ETF, or why are you doing it this way? But by the same token, we've been looking for a while, or, kind of looking at it and talking about different ways to have exposure and to kind of diversify. So it's certainly not as if you're not going pure Bitcoin to a degree if you're doing MicroStrategy, because what's MicroStrategy's, strategy is freaking Bitcoin. So it's kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah. And I didn't realize Norway, you just said South Korea is number 3, Norway's number 2, and Japan's number 1.
Yeah, yes, that's the sourcing that I saw for the top 3 funds. I don't think that that's the same as this Norway sovereign wealth fund, which we're talking about. I think that might be a subset of it, but.
Interesting. So speaking of Norway, again, like all this adoption, South Korea, Norway, and I assume these countries' pension funds are bigger. You didn't mention the U.S. because the U.S. is probably state by state, and in some cases maybe even like teachers union by teachers union. So there's they're spread out in buckets, whereas these are whole countries that they're run from the countrywide side. So yeah, that's the other news. Norway has enough Bitcoin now that's $27 per citizen, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a start with this self-sovereign wealth fund. And that's 2,446 Bitcoin. So again, it's a start for a country which Disco's just told us is the second biggest pension fund in the world behind Japan. So just again, the adoption is insane and it just keeps going.
Yeah, I think that's pretty incredible. Like I'd be certainly happy if we could say, XYZ countries or whatever, everybody has exposure to Bitcoin. It doesn't have to be, everyone's got a whole coin or anything like that, but you're going to benefit from the rise. We talked about it with Wisconsin, we saw New Jersey, we've seen all these other, kind of operations or states or getting involved. And once they do that, it's like they really are kind of looking out for their citizens and getting them, or whoever's involved in the pension, and getting them to the point that they have exposure. And that's really the goal right now, is to get as many people exposure, before liftoff. And, I say kudos to these pension funds that are really starting to lead the way.
Yeah. And I said it once last week, I tweeted about it. And I'm going to say it again now. So there are 21 million Bitcoin. There are roughly 63, 64 million millionaires in the world. That number's probably higher now with inflation, because millionaire, even though it means a lot, it doesn't mean as much as it used to. So there are 3 millionaires per every Bitcoin. So Blue Toshi math says that if all of we early adopters can just snag somehow 0.33 Bitcoin, you're going to be a part of the next generation of millionaires, or deca millionaires, or dare I say 100 millionaires. What is that? Deca's 10, 100 is millimillionaires. I don't know. That's a billionaire. It's a lot. So 0.33 Bitcoin, and that doesn't even count that's just the millionaires. That's individuals. That doesn't count the fact that Wisconsin Pension Fund already has it. That doesn't count New Jersey, or the fact that Hong Kong is adopting Bitcoin, or Michigan, or Goldman Sachs, or all the hedge funds. That's just people. So if you put all these, and you actually could do the math, like, I don't know, Disco, maybe by the year 2045 or whatever, Micro Saylor came out with his estimate. What was his mid-range estimate? His low estimate was 3 million. And his mid was 6. So 0.1 Bitcoin would be 600,000 in like 20 years, right? Yeah. So There you go. So just stack sats.
Yeah, it's incredible, and it'll be really fascinating to see. We had kind of the early advent in first quarter, and we're starting to see kind of the feedback and the data from the institutions that jumped in and got involved with the ETFs when they were launched in first quarter. It'll be interesting to see over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, how the pie really starts, shaping out in terms of nations and pensions, and then institutions and hedge funds and retail. So again, you only have, so many sandwiches in a $21 million picnic basket, or 21 millions circulation picnic basket. So those sandwiches are going to get doled out, and they're going to get eaten, and they're going to get held. And it'll be great to see, what countries really do that. We talked a little bit, about El Salvador and what they're doing, and how, they had funding from other countries and firms in other countries trying to build out Bitcoin City and stuff. So all this stuff sounded kind of like fantasy a little bit, a couple of years ago, but now it's definitely becoming a real reality. So it's encouraging as heck to see.
Yeah, I mean, the adoption is everywhere. Dubai is putting cryptocurrency laws into employment contracts, because I guess there were some disputes there. So it's happening. And I saw that stat that you posted, Disco. 60% of hedge funds are holding cryptocurrencies. I know maybe it was 60% of like the Big 10 or something, but a lot of hedge funds are definitely getting into crypto too. And I guess the reason we bring all this up, and the adoption, this global adoption, because, a lot of the people who listen to this show and who we follow and follow us, we were early. We beat everyone there. So we just want to make sure, like, as important as countries are for our bags to go up, we want to make sure that your bags are packed before all the sovereigns get in, and at some point the scale tips so much where it gets super expensive. Which even then it might not be too late, because then the laggards, they got to come too.
Yeah.
But we're still on the slow motion train, and we can still jump on and front run it. But the time is now.
Yeah. So, it's that over 60% of the leading global hedge funds are now investing in Bitcoin via the ETFs. And what I thought was really interesting out of all that kind of news that came, the Bitwise head of research from Europe basically did a breakdown of that. And what was really stuck out to me was that the institutional investors who got in on the ETFs in Q1, 44% of those have raised their exposure since their initial exposure, and 22% have maintained and are stable. So now you're looking at, I'm not great at math, but that's 66% of those that got in
You're good
have
enough.
held or included. Yes, I like
check.
one or two dozen,
double digit addition check.
Yes, I'm like, well, that's over half. I can go there, or I can go up to the 66. Yeah. But they're not jumping, they're not flipping, they're holding, and they're adding. And that's kind of the whole theme of, like, it's not just, stack sats from retail folks or whatever. It's that stack sats mentality has kind of penetrated, traditional finance and Wall Street. And, once that starts and people follow on, as you say, like, we should be excited about where things are headed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. And that goes right into, our third story, which I love this. Bitcoin Magazine, their data just showed that 75% of all Bitcoin has been held or hasn't moved for 6 months. And, 6 months doesn't sound like a long time, but I think when you get into everything you've heard with, the BlackRock's accumulating, when all these sell-offs happen, BlackRock isn't selling off. Those numbers and their ETF just keep going up. But again, we don't care about BlackRock. There's so many of us holders out there, like, with all the ebbs and flows, the fact that 75% of that Bitcoin is just not going anywhere, that's a big number. It's not like that's 50% or like 30%. Like 75% people are hodling, and they're going, touching grass, setting it, forgetting it, or they're way too involved in this space and following every little trend, trying to pick through to find the coolest stuff for our listeners like we are. But that's a bullish number, Disco.
Yeah, and you got to think about it too. There's all that holdings going on, and we've still had, I think it was a 21% dip from the all-time highs. So it's not like it's been just straight, hockey stick up since it happened. We had it come out and we had it go up, and we've been weathering this. And, I think everybody's starting to understand that it's not a Bitcoin situation. Bitcoin doesn't care. There can be, all these other headwinds and all these things out there. But at the end of the day, you read the putt, it's always kind of going to go right into the cup if you're sticking with this strategy. So it's really, it's legit for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the ETFs, we're still at 17 billion all in. So that number has definitely slowed down, I would say. You can see Bitcoin's had positive inflows, but it's only been, it's been under 100 million every day in the last 5 trading days. So there was a negative day last week, but the point is that it's definitely just, with the ETFs at least, it's just growing. So at some point, every week I check how much Bitcoin is on the exchanges. This week, the number's 12.4%. So it's around where it's been the last couple months. Honestly, it's been hovering. I think the low was 9 when we did it in the last, we've been measuring it for a year, and the high has been like 12.9%. But the fact of the matter is 10% plus or minus are on the exchanges. That's not much. And that just goes right back to the 75% hold for 6 months plus. Most people are not selling.
Yeah. And I just saw this come through, and I'm fascinated by it, but they're saying that the Bitcoin ETFs have the 3rd largest year-to-date inflows of all global ETFs. And I'm like, oh, let me look at that. What does that mean? The number 1 and number 2 are both like S&P 500 ETFs. So
right.
Basically, that's the oldest strategy, right? Like, oh, just put yours in a and let it do its work. And it's like, And now, so you have like the Vanguard one, and that's above it, and another one, and then you're sitting there, and it's IBIT. So it's just like this BlackRock Bitcoin ETF is just blowing people away in terms of the amount of inflows, and it's really wedging itself within like these incredibly like old conservative strategies, yet it's infiltrated right into there. So it's remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to put the cart before the horse a little. We don't have to go full
Ooh.
Ethereum because we do have a couple Ethereum stories. But Disco, I know you did some research, and Ethereum ETFs aren't having the same happy-go-lucky news, are they?
No, because we're kind of looking almost about a month since it started rolling,
Right.
and the total outflows is like 440 million. And if you compare that to Bitcoin in the first month, it was averaging about 125 million in inflows per day. So
Wow.
it's a completely different situation when you're looking at a net negative 440 with the ETH. So I remember, Blue, you kind of called it, and I was probably a little more bullish on thinking that we'd see quicker traction with the Ethereum launch of the ETFs, and you were like, well, we'll see. And I think your "we'll see" was probably right, and it kind of leads just to thinking overall about is this time to look at repositioning, for the long haul? Is this potentially indicative of a transition and kind of a realization that people do want to potentially move to working on Bitcoin with the layer one and everything like that, as opposed to this strategy of L2s? Or is it like, hey, you just got to be patient and let this L2 strategy play out? It seems as if BlackRock remains extremely committed to Ethereum in terms of their support of the ETF, but outside of it, I'm just not man on the street right now at the bus stop. Like, I'm not hearing as much about Ethereum as I used to hear, and I'm just curious if this may be one of those times to kind of take a look at your bags and think about a potential repositioning to some degree.
Yeah, you read my mind in what I'm thinking about and doing. I got a couple validators.
Yeah.
I've got a CryptoPunk, so I'm still, and I've got some art that I love on ETH. It's less expensive stuff. Like, I don't have a Fidenza or anything, but and if I did, I think I would probably hold some of that old art on ETH. But I mean, here are the numbers. So last 30 days, Ethereum, they were lagging, but NFT sales have actually picked up. We do know that it sounds like a good chunk of that has been this little pickup in the CryptoPunks. The wash trading has gone down for Ethereum, but I always look at buyers and sellers. So Ethereum, NFT sales by volume, and NFT sales isn't the only thing on a chain. But in Ethereum, it's obviously a big part of that chain. So I like to look at that for Ethereum versus Solana versus Bitcoin. Ethereum had 69,000 buyers and 58,000 sellers. So a net inflow in, which is good. But again, look at Solana. We just found out, Disco, that the Solana ETF was dead on arrival, and maybe they want to pump the brakes, slow it down. And I can't believe I was about to say in Gary Gensler's defense, but I don't want to be quoted in that. So thank God I just stuttered it, so people can't even get a good take. But Solana had a lot distributed to the foundation and the founders and a lot of VCs, so I don't blame them for pumping the brakes. But that said, look at Solana's numbers. So I told you Ethereum has 70,000 buyers in the last month of NFTs. Solana's at 315,000. And you got to remember too, Solana owns the meme coin market. There's well over 1 million now. I think that the market's a bit deflated right now. I think the people are kind of, pump funds got some kind of negative news surrounded. Yeah. At least it didn't sound good to me. But Solana is definitely owning meme coins. And I think it's getting early entrants to the ecosystem because the price barrier of entry for a transaction fee is cheap, and the NFTs on Solana obviously are probably cheaper too. Solana's got a lower cost to it. I'm sure there's some expensive one there, but in general, it's lower than Ethereum. So 315,000 to 70,000. What is that like? That's at least a 4+X on Ethereum. And, interestingly too, Bitcoin was down to 36,000. So they were actually half of ETH. The ordinals market has been, I would say it's been a little flat. The runes market's been a little flat.
Yeah.
Arsic and Billy, these guys made some runs, but they're kind of, it's already a lot of those peaks have already kind of come back. So I don't think runes is going to have its day, but I don't think it's had its day yet. So my point in all this is that Ethereum is struggling. And I think it's struggling for a narrative. The new entrants are coming to Solana first. They've got the meme coins, and Bitcoin, once you kind of go there, at least in my opinion, my art will be bought on Bitcoin. If it's on chain and it's ETH, like some of Harvey Rayner stuff, maybe. But other than that, it's Bitcoin for me. And certainly I'm going to stack sats over Ethereum because Ethereum, the usage and the gas fees have gone way down. And you would say, oh, that's great. New people can come in and have cheaper gas fees. Well, it's not great for a validator and it's not great for the network because, a busy chain is a healthy blockchain. And Ethereum right now does not feel healthy to me. And it does not feel like the spotlight is on them.
Yeah. Here's let me, what's the opposite of a pro tip question? When we're looking, at the Solana, buyers on this NFT sales volume, does that or does that not include meme coins?
I do not believe it does. And I love this site. We should actually reach out to Crypto Slam. Let's just see if they have, theirs is all NFTs right now. They should really start including meme coins as well, because that would be cool to see an overall total market comparison. But there's probably other charts we can use for a general, like how busy is this blockchain, how many transactions are there, and stuff like that. That includes everything. But I think what you're saying is you'd love to see the breakout, because I think with Ethereum and ERC20 tokens, I guess that would be the equivalent of their meme coin market. They've got the L2s. To circle back to your point, which a lot of people out there are talking, and you just mentioned it, that Ethereum L2s could have come too early and they're kind of detracting from the main chain. And I don't disagree. I'm not remotely about to buy any art or really transact much on any of those layer 2s. Now, maybe if there was something cool or funny on base, maybe, but yeah, I just don't see it. And they're a pain in the ass to get to. Bridging to an L2, like
it's a
I have all these wallets. I'm like, oh, I have optimism and optimism, but I also have ETH and optimism. Like, what do I have and where? Like, I need to consolidate everything, probably get a lot of it off. And I'm sure some of those will be successful, but the L2s, there's something not working about them. And I think the Ethereum network is slowing down, and having a bunch of validators, a bunch of ETH, and a CryptoPunk, that scares me.
Yeah. And, you hear about, it's like the big rallying cry is, oh, well, Base is going to do this or that. But it almost feels, and this is more just, I go off of gut and feels and emo. It's like, it almost feels like Base is kind of like.
Did you say emo?
Yeah. It's
I just want to make sure.
It's like, feels a little centralized. You got Coinbase in there and you get it in there. So it kind of feels like a big, kind of a big brother type of, person tipping the scale a little bit on that. So it all just with the overall narrative, I will say, like, when I first got into the space, whatever generation I'm going to consider myself, top of the froth, most recent one was anybody I would come across or talk to who would introduce me to anything was always leading with Ethereum. And that was the narrative. And there was just everything. Oh, you got to learn about Ethereum. Oh, Bitcoin's a pet rock, but Ethereum's where everything's being built and all the real developers are there and that's where it's going. And I wonder now, if you're coming in, if you're just hearing like, dude, don't bother with that, just jump on Solana. Like, that's where it is. And if it's kind of just, getting skipped and it had its time as kind of the, the share of voice or whatever whatever we used to speak about for that side of it. But it just does feel like almost more desperate when you're hearing like, but guys, wait, Ethereum's going to work out. It's like, well, look at the day to day. It's not having its time right now.
Yeah, those are all such great points, Disco. Yeah, it feels like I don't follow, and mad respect to him, but like 6529, I don't really follow him anymore. And a lot of those, like the DC investor guy, like good takes, but they're so Ethereum chain centric that I'm like, you're not seeing the mass exodus. You're just promoting your Ethereum bags. And who knows, maybe you and I were more on the Bitcoin side now, especially with ordinals and runes and stuff like that. But I feel like while we're not as active in Ethereum and Solana anymore, most of my investments there are more passive. I just feel like, they think it's coming back. They think the NFT market, for ETH is coming back. And I think a lot of people left and don't really plan on coming back unless there's some groundbreaking thing.
Yeah, they have no loyalty. Like people coming in have no loyalty to the past and what was, promised there. It's more like what's going on now. And I'll tell you, interfacing on Solana is, to me, from my perspective, a hell of a lot easier than navigating L2s and moving around and bridging and all that stuff. Like you just move quick, it's fast, it's cheap, and before you know it, it actually lands and it's done. And so I don't know, it's something to look at. I know that there's a big argument about the institutional side of it and the tokenization and all that, and that does seem to be leaning towards Ethereum, at least at this point, till we see more developments of Bitcoin capabilities and stuff. So maybe that's where it'll be, and who knows, maybe we'll sit back and be like, dude, that ended up being the smart play because you have BlackRock using everything to tokenize everything on Ethereum, this, that, or the other. But it doesn't seem like a very clear rallying cry right now to be extremely compelled to jump back into the ecosystem and or to invest right now.
Yeah, and that's certainly a big gamble. So as I get to the year end, I am probably going to rebalance my crypto holdings. And probably take down Ethereum. Now with the Solana ETF, probably not going to be approved anytime soon. Maybe I'll put it there. I'm so heavily stacked on Bitcoin.
Stacked
do I put more there and just keep stacking sats? But this is going to be tough. So for those listening, I'm pulled up. There's a great website called ultrasound.money, and it tells you exactly what's going on and how busy the Ethereum chain is, and whether it's inflationary at the moment or deflationary. And right now it is inflationary again, and it was deflationary for a while. So the last 30 days it's been inflationary. And that is dependent. The busier the chain is, for those of you who don't know, on Ethereum, the more ETH gets burned in transactions. The more ETH that gets burned, the more the actual total supply of ETH, which is right now 120,290,109, goes down. But a not busy chain, they have to reward validators, kind of like, I'm going to keep this really simple and technically probably going to get it wrong, but it goes up because the transactions aren't able to burn some of the ETH, and ETH is going to rewards to stakers. So it's actually going up a little, but it's gone up 61,000 ETH since 30 days ago. Now net overall, since the merge, Ethereum is still deflationary. I mean, we're talking less than 1%, but it is trending up right now. So will ETH get busy again or not? Yes, it will find its use case, but Disco, I think you called it. Like, if we're going to depend on Larry Fink tokenizing everything on ETH, and that's the main play, I'm certainly going to keep some money in ETH, but that's a higher risk play to me.
It's a higher, maybe you just invest in BlackRock at that point, right? Because look at where I'm going with it as opposed to where it plays. But you look, it's like, is Larry is he motivated to, help retail investors and to help see that go up. And that's kind of, how you look at that. He can have all the plans to tokenize everything and go from that perspective. But, we talk about it with, when things could potentially change and when it makes sense to hold a lot of Uniswap because, they'll be able to then in turn take care of holders with that and all that stuff. So that's kind of where it's at right now until I see like a compelling, a lot of people are coming on and using it for this, and this can then that benefits validators or holders because of this. But, as you're saying, if the gas fees are down to, as low as they are and the activity's down, then where's your benefit in being a validator at this point and really kind of investing in that side of things?
Yeah. Wow. So we didn't plan to go there so deep on ETH today, but it is a concern of mine, and sounds like it is yours too. And I think the voices out there are saying the same thing. And who knows? That's either a good time to buy a crabby dip, which I love crab dip, but it also could be time to rebalance. So this will be interesting, and we'll keep you informed as things go on. Next on the list, this one's kind of fun.
Oh, I'm waiting.
So, Disco, why don't you share this one? I love this.
Well, how can we, I mean, I'll give you a little bit of background. Full disclosure, during this show is not the only time that I converse with Blue Toshi over the course of the week. And we were talking at some point this week, and I'm like, oh my God, look at this. This story's just coming over. This is crazy. They're saying that Kamala Harris is going to name Gary Gensler as the Treasury Secretary. And instantly, like, oh my God, instantly you just start processing and you're like, and it looks like it got liked like 2,600 times on Bitcoin Magazine alone. So that amplifies it to, all this stuff. And it turns out when the dust kind of settled, and the dust settled quickly, frankly, was that there wasn't a lot of strong roots to the core of the story. And as that awesome visual says, who knows, it could have been Mr. Gensler who was feeding that out there. But it's just an example of the need to be critical in your analysis of the information that you're being served, and also to make sure, kind of like how you have to have a little bit of a delay back in the day on responding to emails. You need to kind of take a little bit of a delay on some of these things that come across the wire, because that couldn't have been a bigger potential poison pill for the whole crypto for Harris movement and all that side of it to get sideswiped. All they have to do is say, Gensler, he's going to be in there. And you're like, what can we possibly do? So it was just, I know I'm going all over, but it really kind of wound me up just on so many different levels to see something get so potentially viral so quickly, not get really fact checked, have a bunch of influencers go around and spread it as well, and then sit there and be like, there's really no basis to this story, as opposed to, just kind of trying to get another barb in there from the other side.
Yeah. Breaking news. Gary Gensler will be Treasury Secretary. Source, Gary Gensler. It's like what I picture? I was trying to get Venice AI or one of those to make a nice picture for me, but I wrote Gary Gensler sending a note to himself in school, and the other one was Gary Gensler whispering to himself in a mirror, because I thought that would have been better, but it didn't. It didn't want to, for some reason, there must be other Gary Genslers. It didn't grab him for whatever reason. So just an interesting little tidbit. But this obviously would be terrible news for the Democratic Party, but it sounds like it's fake news. It's Gary news. It sounds like Gary's planting his own seeds because he's got no support left to say it for him. It's like, I'd like to nominate myself for president. Like, no, somebody else nominates you, buddy. Come on, you're out.
Yeah. Blue Toshi's running.
For Treasury Secretary or for what?
To be determined. We'll have to see where we end up with the show, but a significant position of potential influence, and we'll start spreading it from the show like this. It's unbelievable that this is the world that we live in, when you sit there and you can see a story and then you can see it kind of flame out, and then you can see, I know some people actually went in and kind of sourced, where it came from. And apparently there was like a Republican candidate for Congress that kind of said, I heard that some people are thinking about this. Then that quickly transformed into like congressional sources say, and then it turned into like, Harris to name Gensler. So it's just the maturation and just kind of the 0 to 1,000 on this stuff is just really what's important to be aware of. As I say, we're sitting there, 70 whatever days out of the election. So I do think the pump's going to be primed for a lot more of this stuff.
Yeah, buckle up. But bye bye, Gary. I can't even look at him anymore. Although this probably
Yeah,
is
thank.
good for people scrolling by, be like, Gary. But look, I was able to put an emoji on the end there. I saw a little emoji button. I'm like, oh, perfect. Like, so now I can add little headlines and titles with emojis. So the studio is
Is
always,
that a monocle?
that is a monocle. So they're they're
Nice.
they're they're questioning Gary. That's one of my favorite ones. All right, so moving right along. This is very interesting. So, Game of Trades is actually a Twitter handle, but I believe they have a newsletter that kind of gives um, trade advice and trading advice. You know, there's a million out there, but they're doing some really cool research. So, tip of the hat to them. Follow them on Twitter. But you know, we're all in Bitcoin. Like, not that we want a recession, but we're like, it's got to be coming. And this data was an eye opener to me. Disco, you know, I'm looking everywhere I possibly can for data. But this is a chart from 1991 to present. The amount of credit card defaults has skyrocketed lately to just under 8%. And for context, for those listening, since 1991, it has never reached these levels. And for context, also, everybody, that those vertical gray lines are where the recessions did happen. Obviously, the big 2008, 2009 recession, and then the 2001 recession. And every single time, credit card defaults are always at the beginning or possibly in 2021, the tail end of being at a high. And we are over the default levels for all of them. So consumers out there are struggling. They're way in debt. That next gray line, you know, could it be 2024? We don't know, but it's not looking good. So in addition to that, savings are contracting. So the net savings as a percentage of gross national income for people, savings from 1940s to today has been just going down, down, down. But it's basically at zero right now. And when you have no savings, you've got no buffer. And when you have no buffer, that makes it very difficult. So again, the savings, except for 2008 when everybody went upside down and there was basically a bailout reset, the number and the amount of money that people have saved for an emergency, a rainy day, whatnot, or for expendable income has never been lower. Who cares? So what? So what does that mean? The probability of a recession is elevated, and the yield curve compared to the 12 months prior is a huge indicator. And right now, every gray line there, going back to 1960, is a recession. And looking at the yield curve, pretty much every single time it peaks, a recession happens. The only one where the yield curve is higher, with a higher probability of recession, was in the early 80s. But so all of those things combined, this isn't to be doomsday or anything like that, but it's just to show, like, you know, Disco and I think Bitcoin will go down when the market goes down, because for the majority of institutions on Wall Street, that's the end of the tail risk on assets. For us, it's a run to safety. But as this recession happens, as Eric Voorhees said last week, that's when Bitcoin, when we have a big 2008, 2009 moment, that's when Bitcoin will have its true moment, and it will tell us whether it's ready or not. I suspect Bitcoin will go down as fast or faster in a massive panic sell recession, and then it will bounce back first among all of them, because not everyone's going to go to Bitcoin as a store of value. They'll probably still go back to gold or US treasuries or somewhere, but more and more people will go to Bitcoin, at least with a part of their assets.
Wow. There's a lot to process from looking at that. You know, you always obviously are hearing inflation, you know, elevated inflation and how that impacts this, right? And then obviously, Captain Obvious on the interest rates impacting, people with credit card debt, right? Like, so when that just is at the point that it is, yeah, you can stave it off for a bit, but there does come a reckoning, so to speak, right? So that's what all this is kind of pointing towards. And it'll be interesting though, when you say, that the institutions are gonna, flee, so to speak, if this would happen. The beginning of the show was all about how they kind of understood and have demonstrated some hodl mentality. So it would be kind of interesting to see. I don't think these pension funds are coming in on these investments in a short-term window. I know when we were talking about, Cynthia Loomis and RFK and everybody talking about the reserve asset, they were all talking about like a 20-year hold period and all that. So maybe, it does, as Eric kind of indicated, maybe that does become the real test of the viability of this whole, Bitcoin,
Yeah.
Prospects moving forward. So it's not like, oh, I want to see it happen, but it's kind of like, in a weird way, let's see how it does, and let's see how it really goes, because that could be the impetus to see some of this really go. Because I see restaurants crowded. I see stock markets at all-time highs. I see, the mall parking lots packed. I don't see a lot of people saying that they can't, I see a lot of economic activity, I guess is what I'm saying. And I don't understand how it can continue at the level it has, because we haven't really seen that post-pandemic, boom period like the roaring 20s that I was promised and excited about when I was kind of holed up in the basement. Oh, everything's going to go crazy.
Yeah.
I never saw it. So we'll see.
Yeah. So Speed Racer, one of my favorite people in the space. And when he's on a spaces, an audio spaces, I always tune in because he has more insight than a lot of people I hear out there. He's got a very level head, but he understands the markets really well. And he has a couple comments. Fed funds rate hasn't been this high since 2007. So there's a lot of economic stimulus that can occur via cutting. Fed put back in place, and that's why stocks are doing so well. So yeah, it's like they keep and they keep pumping and the party keeps going. But at some point, with 35 trillion in debt, you can't, at some point the musical chairs have to stop, and there's not going to be enough seats to hold it. Further, he goes on, one of the first cutting cycles where cutting is occurring because of inflation coming down and not the impending recession, as a soft landing requires a weaker economy. So yeah, landing this airplane now is going to be insanely difficult. And at some point, even if this airplane somehow, as interest rates we all know is going to come down soon, landing this airplane softly is going to be difficult. And Speed Racer probably know this better than I, but I think a lot of times recessions happen. It's not right when interest rates are super high and everything should be breaking and all the zombie companies can't afford their debt anymore. It happens like, I think it's like 9 to 18 months after it starts getting lowered, which is interesting. So there's always this delayed effect when the true recession happens. So, history never exactly repeats itself, but it always rhymes, and all of us just need to, in many ways, be prepared for what's coming.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great piece of research.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, hats off to Game of Trades. Check out their site, and appreciate you letting us use this research because, looking at the macro and trying to understand trends and trying to kind of predict when they happen is super important. So where are we, Disco? It's Bitcoin Infinity Day. Oh, the surprises. We're at
yes. I've been very, very patient, sir. Which is not one of my strong suits. So,
all right,
let's unwrap something.
So we are on this. This is actually a pretty big unwrap, and actually, this was a surprise to me this morning. But Disco, I am going to share my screen right now, and I just figured this out this morning. But I would like you to look at the punk sales.
Okay.
So the third one from the right on the top is mine. And I had no idea because I don't get alerts or anything. So I set my punk for sale like a year
Oh my
ago
God.
at
I was looking.
at
Oh,
108, and my punk sold this morning. So I am Blutoshi, aka Chicago X or Chicago, in the ETH days, is no longer a crypto punk holder. So I gotta
wow.
say I'm happy, but it's also a little bittersweet. This one, even though his hair is darker, it does kind of look like me. Um, I do know in one of my in that OG Bitcoin group I was in, they called these shit eaters the Van Dyke beards or the goatees. So I was like, no, 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 and they're like, well, yours isn't as bad because. And once they said that, I couldn't unsee it. But you know what? I do love this punk. I love the purple glasses. It definitely looked like me at some point in my life. But that CryptoPunk has sold. So I'm going to admit here, when you take an L, you take an L. This is a double L. Okay. I bought this and I thought I actually bought it at kind of a low time, not for CryptoPunk prices necessarily, but when ETH was at a low point. Um, and I bought it for, what did I buy it for? 99 so ETH. So I basically bought it for 100 ETH. And I tried to sell it for 108. I knew it probably wasn't going to sell. And then finally I capitulated when it went way down. I was like, I'm going to sell it. So I bought it for 134 grand at 99 ETH, and I just sold it at 35 ETH for $90,000. So I'm taking the only positive thing from a financial standpoint is I get to offset
Awesome.
other gains for tax loss harvesting. The really painful side though is because ETH is double the price it was when I used the ETH to buy it. I bought it for basically 100 ETH and sold it for 35. So big L for Blutoshi. But my interests don't lie there anymore. And you know what? I have 35 ETH back in play, and now I've got to figure out what to do with it. So big day. This literally happened this morning.
Wow.
And the only reason
Really?
I even looked is because I saw you post the research that, ETH, like they're back up to 30 and people are, stuff's moving. I'm like, maybe mine moved. And I looked, I'm like,
Are you serious? That's how it came about?
yeah, I didn't see it for sale. And then I looked, I'm like, oh my God, there it is. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a okay. I unwrapped the gift, and now I'm trying to figure out, if I like it, or what it's about. But that's
Yeah, I don't know
that's
how I feel either. I'm
yeah.
gonna just for the end of the show, Disco. So Scribe is coming in. So we're actually, everybody out there, we're gonna do a dedicated R6 show. We're gonna start the feed over to keep it fresh. But I'm gonna bring Scribe in right now, whether he wants to be brought in or not, and just so he can say hi. But subscribe. We're going to do a new feed, and everybody out there, we're going to go full blown RSIC mode. And I actually, Scribe, you're going to be happy about this. I have it prepared. If I can find, I've got too many windows open, but topic one. Okay, get rid of Infinity Day. Here we go. So we got the logo from last week. So full on RSIC,
All right.
everybody. Disco, do we have any other news this week, or are we good?
I'll just give a quick. The only thing we didn't really touch on that we've been kind of following all the way through has been, just what's going on from the presidential race side of it and everything there. And interestingly enough, despite it being, kind of right in the middle of the Democratic convention, we're seeing today that Trump is up 52 to 47 in poly market. So that was a change that came about. That's something somewhat interesting. And then also the other news to kind of keep an eye on is RFK Jr.'s vice president candidate was on a podcast yesterday and expressed the ticket was looking at potentially, stepping down and endorsing Trump and lining up over there. And right now it's an 85% odds that RFK will drop out. So I know we've been kind of watching all that stuff. There hasn't been anything from the Democrats from a crypto perspective out of the convention, despite the fact that they had their, the Crypto for Harris event last week. So we'll wait to see anything solid come out of there. But it is interesting to see that despite all the attention from the Democratic convention, that Trump just jumped back up 5 points on Polymarket. So we'll be sure to keep everyone in the loop on that.
Yeah, that is interesting because, he was killing Biden, 73 to like 28 at the end, or maybe 70 to 28 with Michelle Obama getting 2%, which was the most bizarre. Like it wasn't even RFK Jr. getting the 2%. It was her, but now she flipped him last week and now he is slightly edging her out. So it's neck and neck. I just suspect this is getting manipulated, and I'm sure they're like, because now now that Nate Silver's there, this is the main poll that people are using for the election, at least we crypto folks for sure. And Scribe, by the way, you are visible now. I added your feed to the thing, and he's got his Billy glasses, which we met at, which was awesome. He's got the trophies there. Disco, we could start a new feed, or we could just do the ending now and keep rolling and do another intro and just kind of keep the live feed flowing. Are you cool with that, Scribe?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So all right, cool guys. So everybody, this nothing we said in here, trust me when I say this, we are not financial advisors, and this is not financial advice. None of it was said, but hopefully, we this is independent media. Shit, we're friends with people like Scribe. Like we tell it true, we tell it honest, and follow us, tell your friends, and like it, and add comments, because you saw Speed Racer, you saw OMC MFer. I'm going to add him again, but he's saying happy Bitcoin Infinity Day and RSIC mode enabled, and you're damn right. We're going straight into RSIC.
Let's do it.
So cool, guys. So thanks everybody for the news, and with that, we are out. Just to be back in.